Hello and welcome to Point of View, the show that decodes the region and beyond. I am Wasbir Hussain. As US President Trump goes berserk, viewers, the world's attention has been focused on two of the most populous nations in the world, India and China. One has seen a lot of interactions between the two Asian giants in the past 8 months or so after a frosty relationship post the Galwan clashes of June 2020. We had the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in India last fortnight, and we are now getting ready to see our Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi visiting China after a gap of 7 years to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or the SCO summit between 31st of August and 1st of September. After Wang Yi's visit, a 10-point consensus was declared on a fair, reasonable and mutually acceptable framework for settlement of the boundary question. India also raised the issue of terrorism in all its manifestations, including cross-border terrorism. And New Delhi did not fail to express its concerns over the construction of the Chinese mega dam on the Yarlung Changpo that becomes the Brahmaputra on the Indian side. The Chinese side agreed to share advanced hydrological information during emergencies based on humanitarian considerations. According to the Chinese media, after Wang Yi's visit, China hopes to work with India to deliver on the important common understandings between the leaders of the two countries, keep the momentum of high-level exchanges, enhance political mutual trust, strengthen practical cooperation, properly handle differences, and promote the sustained, sound and steady development of China-India relations. Now, the big question is, can the two sides agree on what they mean by normalcy? While India says there can be no normalcy until the boundary question is resolved, China says the boundary question should not be allowed to hold ties in other areas like trade or people-to-people cooperation hostage. Now, are we to look at the current India-China contacts and decisions as a thaw in ties or a mere tactical shift in strategy? What do we make of the Chinese expressing their desire to resume direct flights between India and the Chinese mainland? India relaxing granting of visas for Chinese businessmen and tourists, and China agreeing to resume export of tunnel boring machines, rare earth materials, fertilizers like urea and so on. To discuss this and more, I am joined tonight by Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, the distinguished fellow at the Gateway House. He is joining me from Noida. Lieutenant General Rana Pratap Kalita, until recently the General Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Eastern Command. He is joining me from Guwahati. Professor Swaran Singh, a professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University and one of India's well-known China experts, is joining from New Delhi. And Dr. Sriparna Pathak, Professor of China Studies at the O.P. Jindal Global University, is also joining me from Delhi. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my show. Now, let me go straight to you, Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia. As I've asked in the title of my program tonight, India-China ties, a thaw or a tactical shift. What do you think, Ambassador? Is it a thaw really or a tactical shift? And do you think we should look at it through the Trumpian lens as India-US ties grow turbulent?
Thank you very much. Very timely debate you are presiding over, and I would basically like to start by saying that the binary approach of a very sharp TV anchor is of course most welcome, but we diplomats have a way to handle such direct questions. I think we can perhaps see that this is both a thaw and a tactical shift, but that would be a conclusion which might emerge from our discussions. I think to put it quite directly, we have to remember that India-China relationship is one of the most important and complex relationships in the world today. I think for a long time we have been led to believe that if these two countries can live peacefully and if there could be a stable, secure Asia, then the world would be much better off. But the challenge is how to ensure that. And there are three factors we have to keep in mind. First of all, geographic proximity. We are neighbors. The second, asymmetry in power. We all know that economically and militarily, we are dealing with a very big neighbor. And the third is history. it is true that before 1947 or 1949, the two countries, two civilizations had a good relationship in overall terms. But since that year, 1949 to present, the relationship has been very checkered. It has gone through a very difficult time. So, keeping all these three factors in mind, we have to remember that 2025 is a year, or more precisely 2024 October, the year starting from then, has been the year or the time when both countries are making a sincere efforts to normalize and improve the relationship. They are doing this keeping in mind the present status of various issues that are on the table, but they're probably also keeping an eye on the changing geopolitical situation, the larger picture. So I would simply summarize all this by saying that we are right in taking seriously the changes which are taking place in India China relationship. There's a need to build upon them. There are opportunities, but there are serious challenges as well.
Okay, there are opportunities and there are serious challenges as well, and we have to take the India China changes, what we have seen over the last couple of months, seriously. I've got two very well known China experts on the program tonight. I will go first to Swaran Singh, and then I will come to Lieutenant General Kalida. Before ending the first round with Dr. Siparna Pathak, let me go to Professor Swaran Singh. Professor Swaran Singh, you have written a very well thought out piece or recently just on the almost as more or less the same topic. Now the question is, there was a time in Galwan not too long ago when 20 of the Indian soldiers were killed. After that, there was a lot of tightening of relationships. India has taken a lot of tough decisions. Now, there was a time when a lot of people thought that it will not be for many years perhaps that the two sides will actually be able to talk to each other, but that has not been the case. Okay, fine, we have seen that the frosty relationship for almost about 4+ years, but for the last 8 to 10 months we have seen already high level Indian ministerial visits to China. And now we have seen the Chinese side starting by expressing the willingness to resume direct flights, so on and so forth, and India relaxing the visas for Chinese businessmen and Chinese tourists. Now, how do you look at it? Is it, are we to look at it from the lens of the India-US ties? Or do you think we have to detach the two and really see a relationship, really see a thaw in the relations between the two Asian giants?
Thank you, Wasbir. I would not rule out the US factor. After all, United States is the most powerful nation, a close friend and partner of India, and a country that sees China as its primary strategic challenge in that sense, or systemic challenge. So there is no denying that, yes, the United States, and particularly the way President Trump has been conducting his policies, particularly tariff hikes, is definitely a factor, but nothing more than just one among several factors. Because if you remember, the fundamental shift or drift that started happening in India-China relations starts from October, if not earlier. Kazan meeting of Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping. I think this was not even the time when Republicans had formally declared that Trump is the next likely president of United States. And of course, his inauguration happened in January. So India and China had started kind of approaching each other to resolve issues much earlier than that. But yes, this shared anxiety about unpredictable President Trump has definitely accelerated that. And we have noticed the Chinese leaders, both Wang Yi and Chinese ambassador in Delhi, both using expressions like bullying, which is disrupting the international stability, and how India and China need to work together on that. So I think in that sense, it is accelerating the process of how India and China wish to resolve some of the issues. But I enjoyed listening to Ambassador's comment, a very subtle way of putting that whether THAW and sort of the thaw and tactical shift are happening simultaneously. To mark slight difference to make my value addition in the discussion, I would say yes, there is definitely a shift, but the fundamental defining feature of relationship remains mutual skepticism, and that is the undercurrent constantly available. So we have moved away from clear confrontation on the border to seeking some kind of thawing and the tactical shift. And to me, that keeps moving from one side to another, from thawing to tactical shift. For example, when Wang Yi comes to New Delhi, meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi, it looks like thawing. When he goes to Islamabad, reaches Kabul, it starts looking like a tactical shift. When Indian Prime Minister goes to Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, it may look like thawing. When
Yeah.
Xi Jinping, along with Shehbaz Sharif, will announce CPEC 2, it will look like tactical shift. So that is the constant drift between one and two, but fundamentally it's no longer defined by confrontation or contestation. I think it's a relative but at least projection that both want to explore opportunities to work together.
Absolutely. Both
Initiatives have started, but remember they'll take time to fructify.
both wants to work together. That is the impression we are getting right now. That's Dr. Swaran Singh said. Let me go to General R.P. Kalita, until recently the Eastern Army commander. General Kalita, now the point is, after Galwan, where 20 Indian soldiers were killed, there was obviously a lot of issues. Now, how does as a military man, General Kalita, how do you look at this, the movements in the last 8 months leading to the visit of Foreign Minister Wang Yi to India, the 10-point consensus, so on and so forth. Now, how do you look at it? Because India says that, the core is the border problem. Unless the border issue is resolved, there cannot be any normalcy. Whereas the Chinese side said that, we should not allow the border issue to hold the relationship hostage in other areas like trade and people-to-people contact.
You see, I would also like to highlight the importance of resolution of the border issue for normalizing the bilateral relationship between India and China, who share about 3,488 kilometers of border, and the entire border is disputed. If you look historically, right from the Chini-Hindi Bye-Bye prior to 62 war up until Galwan conflict, every time the India-China relationship has been swinging between good relations and bad relations,
right?
And it has been basically dictated by the situation in the border. Every time there has been some improvement in the relationship, some incident has taken place along the border, which had primarily again swung back the relationship into a situation of conflict between India and China. So that has been the history. If you look at Doklam incident or Galwan incident, prior to that, Nathula Chola in 60s, Somdangchu incident in 80s, 86, 87. So there have been efforts to normalize relationship, and we have been seeing a possibility of thawing the relationship. But until and unless the basic issue of border is resolved, the problem, to my perception, will continue to remain. Now, if you look at the recent situation, when Galwan took place in the May 2020, the process of disengagement, which is the first stage of the 3 Ds, disengagement, delimitation, and demarcation. So to complete disengagement, it took about 4.5 years. So the process was completed only by agreed to be completed only by October last year. And after that, even the process of delimitation is yet to start, though it has been talked about during the recent visit by the Chinese foreign minister and his meeting with our NSA, Mr. Doval, as part of the SR meeting. So the process of delimitation has to start, and only after that, when there is adequate trust between the two forces, because both the forces presently are in a tripwire sort of deployment. Any sort of tactical situation can escalate into a major, incident which can have strategic ramification.
Absolutely.
So that will continue to remain. So that's the area I think we all need to, address or normalization of relations.
Okay, very important points made by the general there. That now let me turn to Dr. Sriparna Pathak. Sriparna, welcome to my show. This is for the first time that you are on my program. That is why I'm giving you an extended welcome. Actually, Sriparna, the two countries. If you look, there is that mutual distrust and great power ambitions by both the nations. Now, in view of this, in this backdrop, how are we to look at what the public posturing, the public statements made by the Chinese media that we are taking this movements very seriously, we are going to implement all the decisions taken by the leaders, so on and so forth. How do you look at it? As I was asking the question on the title, I will also ask you the same thing. Is it really a THAW or is it just a tactical shift? How do you look at it?
Thank you so much, Mr. Hussain. This is actually the second time I'm on your show.
Okay.
The first one was back in 2018.
Thanks for correcting. Yeah.
When the Siang River was turning black. So quickly coming to, 2 or 3 points as to how this is just optics and this is just tactical moves. First point is Wang Yi came to India. It wasn't the other way around, which means that China needs India more and the Indian economy more as Chinese economic growth rates tumble. India is still the world's fastest growing major economy. As Trump's tariffs target the PRC more and it's a export oriented economy, so the effects of those sorts of tariffs on manufacturing exports have a much more disastrous effect. So which is why China needs to look for alternative markets. What better than the world's largest market? First point is that. Second point is, if you look at all the words which they have used, China immediately said that we are willing to support India against US bullying. Okay, that's great. But here's the thing, Li Changgang, who is the top eyed from Beijing, he is leading the negotiations and heading to DC as we speak. So while posturing or putting India in the front as being bullied by the US, they themselves are willing to talk to the US and make amends or do all of those things. They would be happy if the India US or India West partnership, whatever it means, if it comes unraveling. That's the second thing. When Wang Yi did visit India, he also visited Afghanistan and then Pakistan. And
Yes.
again, the words are important. He said in Pakistan that, as has always been the case, China supports Pakistan's sovereignty and territory. So I think that's China cannot be clearer than that on over that. Look, I think it's very important that India doesn't make historical mistakes. India had given up claims to Tibet. India was the first non-communist country to recognize the PRC and through the ROC Taiwan underbus, despite the fact that Chiang Kai-shek was friends actually with our first prime minister. And India actually got China to the Bandung conference. But none of that was enough because we've seen multiple conflicts after that. So this is again optics. This is a repeat of history. When the PRC needs a partner and a subservient partner in its whole angst with the West, it will reach out to India diplomatically, economically also it needs it right now. So it's important that India doesn't fall into the optics. I don't think India is also engaging in diplomacy etc. But
why do you call India a subservient partner?
because in everything that China has actually done, it's not an egalitarian partnership. Again, using Wang Yi's visit, MOFA, China, had stated that Dr. Jaishankar has stated that Taiwan is a part of China. Whereas he didn't state that. Our MEA had actually to come in and said that we have not stated that. Dr. Jaishankar also questioned Wang Yi and said that if China can trade with Taiwan, why is it that India cannot trade? That being said, even after all sorts of clarifications, Beijing insists that India has said that Taiwan is a part of China.
Okay,
that is not how you treat an equal partner.
Okay, let me take this to Ambassador Bhatia. Ambassador, Sriparna Pathak has said that China needs India more because what better market than the market in India with a huge population. Now, if we look into the indeed at the peak of their border tensions or disputes post Galwan, we have seen the bilateral trade rising from 125 billion in 2021 to 137 billion in billion for 2022. And staying at around 132 billion for 2023, and then it came down a little to about 128 billion for 2024. On the whole, during the entire period of crisis, in the period of this frosty relationship that the two nations had post Galwan, still the trade continued because this is something which the West perhaps has not been able to fathom as to what is going on.
Thank you again. If you'll allow me, I'll certainly handle the trade question. But in order to spice up the discussion, I must express my respect for Professor Sriparna. At the same time, I should also articulate some differences over there. I think this notion that China needs India, so China's foreign minister came here, is really not correct. It is not backed by facts. 3 of India's top dignitaries went to China in the last few months. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, Foreign Minister Jaishankar, and NSA Mr. Doval. And as you said right in the beginning, now Prime Minister is going to China. So who is going where is not an indication of who needs whom more. The fact is, and this is the problem, on the one hand, we should not exaggerate the importance of the outcome of the Wang Yi visit, but on the other hand, we should not trash it. Because if we commit one or the other mistake, Wasbir, then frankly, we would not be able to achieve anything ever in a most complex relationship.
Right.
Let me just very briefly point out that the latest round of talks between the special representatives, that is Wang Yi and Mr. Doval, 5 very, very cogent points were agreed. And they have been put in a masterclass, very brief, crisp document by the Ministry of External Affairs. I don't have the time to summarize them here, but the central point is that the entire boundary question is being handled very diligently and carefully by the top echelons of the government. My second point, Mr. Wang Yi's interaction with Foreign Minister Jaishankar has again resulted in a 12-point formula, which was unthinkable perhaps a few months back, and it covers all pillars of the relationship. It is obviously a readout by us, and Chinese have put out their own readout. This is normal because we have not reached this stage where a joint readout can be put across. So some differences are there, and therefore, if we don't reiterate one China policy because China does not reiterate one India policy, it's understood. There are differences, as I said right in the beginning, there are challenges. But if opportunities are coming, I think a realistic, sober view would be to recognize them. Now, very quickly on trade, I'm not a great expert on trade, but yes, what does it mean? It means that there is a convergence between the Indian market and the Chinese market. It means that the Indian business community and the Chinese business community want to do more business, more trade and investment. And therefore, they certainly would take heart from the fact that the top echelons of the government of India and China are talking and trying hard to put their dialogue back on some kind of a regular train so that very complicated issues begin to get at least addressed, if not resolved.
Right. Absolutely. Now, Dr. Swaran Singh, there is an impression that the Chinese were wary of the Quad. Now, they got an opportunity at the end of the day to perhaps try and wean out India from Quad, because the Chinese, there is a feeling that the Chinese are looking at Quad as an attempt by the United States to weaken China. Do you buy this argument? Do you really see that the Chinese overtures towards India? Because even before we talked about, or we took note of the, as Ambassador said, high-level visitors from India to China. Even before we realized that, or rather took note of that, the Chinese wanted to resume direct flights and so on and so forth. Now, how do you look at this?
As you said yourself, the fundamental difference between China and India in terms of negotiating the current challenges has been that China looks at it in terms of the larger picture of global stability, regional stability, of all issues put together, etc. Whereas India looks at it from border perspective, saying, relations cannot be normal as long as borders are not normal. So whether it is sharing the hydrological data of river waters, or it is pilgrimage to Kailash Mansarovar, or it is, sort of resolving patrolling issues on the line of actual control, etc., etc. India's approach is from that perspective. And both sides are trying to sort of push their own agenda and are accommodating each other at the same time in that sense. So that is the picture. And in that sense, I will agree with the ambassador. I don't think I will kind of categorize relationships as to who needs whom, sort of, and who doesn't need the other side. On different issues, on different occasions, I'm sure both sides definitely need each other with enormous mutual skepticism. So they're kind of trying to explore, can they work together while they don't really trust each other. And the reality is, since you mentioned trade, if you look at India's imports from China, you combine the total imports India makes from five next nations, that will be still smaller than imports that we do from China alone. So in that sense, it depends on how you want to describe it, whether China is dependent on us because we are buying their stuff, or whether we are dependent on them because we need their imports to sort of feed into all kinds of other industries and sectors that make India really much more potent and fastest growing economy and so on, pharmacy of the world, etc., etc.
Right.
So in that sense, it's a complex relationship where both sides would find as to how they can manage that relationship and not make sure that this relationship becomes hostage to anybody. If you ask me whether they would like to wean India away, of course, I mean,
Yeah.
it's clear that if there are tensions between India and the United States, Beijing has no reason but to welcome it and to encourage that and to, sort of utilize that opportunity.
Capitalize on that. Now,
That's why the language, that's why the bullying language is happening.
happening.
But whether they can do that, I don't think they can do that because India is preoccupied with strategic autonomy. India
Absolutely.
doesn't want to be seen bandwagoning anyone. That's an obsession Indian foreign policy has.
Absolutely. You talked about imports, Dr. Suran Singh. Indian imports from China continue to rise from 97 billion in 2021, and now last year it stood at 113.5 billion last year. So Indian imports from China is steadily increasing. That is for the record. I'll go for a very, very quick break. When I come back, I'll go to General Kalita and Dr. Sriparna Pathak. Don't go away. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Let me go to General Kalita. General Kalita, despite all these attempts or these impressions that we are getting about THAW and relationship, the Chinese, as Dr. Sriparna Pathak said, from New Delhi, they went to Afghanistan, they went to Islamabad, and so on and so forth. And in Islamabad, Wang Yi hailed the Pakistani army, hailed it as a cornerstone of resilience and a vital contributor for peace in the region. I'm sure there is nothing more funny than describing Pakistan as a contributor for peace in the region. Now, how do you make of it? On one hand, you are making a great relationship with Bangladesh, saying that where you invite the Bangladesh chief advisor, who says that we are the guardians of the sea. You come and open shop along the northeastern region and so on and so forth, and open your airbase here, make our airbase, build our airbase for us. How do you make of this? The trust deficit, how do we take the Chinese words at face value? Can we?
You see, on the Western front, China has always been with Pakistan, and we have recently seen it during Operation Sindoor also, the type of support that was provided to Pakistan army by armed forces by the Chinese. And immediately after visiting India, as you have stated, the foreign minister of China had gone to Pakistan and Afghanistan. And there is a trilateral level talks between Afghanistan, Pakistan and China, primarily bringing in Afghanistan also to the ambit of BRI for connectivity towards the Central Asian Republic and to boost up their trade and the other connectivity issues. On the eastern side, also, we have seen a similar sort of arrangements between Bangladesh, Pakistan, and China. We know that in Kunming there was a trilateral conference which was attended by representatives of all these three countries. And we also have been traditionally been seeing increased Chinese footprints all around in our neighborhood, whether in terms of what used to be known as string of pearls, as also Siliguri corridor, which I keep reiterating because the vulnerability of Siliguri corridor has been enhanced by the increased Chinese footprint in the areas which is in the immediate neighborhoods of Siliguri corridor. When you talk of Eastern Nepal, when you talk of the tri-junction between Bhutan, India, and China, and even the northern part of Bangladesh, that is Rangpur division, including that Lalmoni Hat airfield, which was recently, which heard that it is being handed over to the Chinese to make it operational. So these are the things which will continue to remain. So what I want to say is, we both the nations, it is good to have good relationship or improved bilateral relationship between both these countries. But it's like the famous saying, there is no permanent friends, there are no permanent enemies, there is only permanent interest. So India, there is a geopolitical flux, as we all have been saying, and there are new realities which are coming in front of us. And as a nation, I think we need to adapt ourselves to this new reality and evolve our own policy based on our own national interest. So that is extremely important for us. And as a military man, what I would like to re-emphasize is our capability enhancement. That process has to continue. There is a huge asymmetry. If you look at the forces between India and China, as in terms of forces as well as in terms of infrastructure along the India-China border, there is a huge asymmetry. We need to bridge this gap, irrespective of in what way the thawing the relationship is coming in. We cannot compromise on our degree of preparedness and our efforts towards capability enhancement to bridge the gap between the Chinese forces and Indian forces.
Okay. That is a purely military perspective. Yes, we cannot ignore that fact. Dr. Sriprana Pathak, around the time Wang Yi was visiting the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, now around that time, President Xi Jinping was in Tibet. Now, in Tibet, he visited, last visit was in 2021, and after a couple of years he has visited Tibet. He emphasized on, to speed up the construction of the big dam in the Yarlung Changpo, about which India has expressed serious concern. Since we are a channel from Northeast India with headquarters in Guwahati, we have been raising this issue in repeated debates as to the concerns in the lower riparian, like places like Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, even Bangladesh. What do you make of that visit, coinciding with Wang Yi's visit to the subcontinent, India in particular?
Thank you so much for the question. And I think I agree mostly with General Kalita. The thing is that, when India keeps getting fooled, the first brunt of it is borne by Northeast India, as we saw in 1962 also. So it's not that China is just creating that sort of a dam and, while it's trying to placate India, there's a very important Tibet link here because it also claims Arunachal Pradesh.
Yeah.
If you've noticed, in the last few years, it started calling Tibet as Xizang. Why Xizang? Because it means Western treasure trove. The moment we normalize calling Tibet Xizang, anything south of it becomes Zangnan or southern Tibet, which is Arunachal Pradesh. So China has a very tacit way of normalizing these sorts of things. So, which is why it does. And it's a master of deception. Wang Yi came to India saying that he is coming for special representative talks, but then he ended up discussing every other thing, primarily economics. When Rajnath Singh ji and when Ajit Doval ji went to China, they stated it was for different AGs of the SU, and that was that. So the deception is very important. In Tibet, in the last few years, China has undertaken a lot of projects which leads to blackening of rivers downstream, particularly in the Brahmaputra and so on. There is the mega dam, of course, to which China is creating. There's also they're building a railway which is way too close to India's borders, particularly in Tibet, and that raises red flags. So it's a long-term plan to slowly, bleeding by 1,000 cuts without actually getting into a fight. So it'll do all sorts of these placating, and if we actually start thinking it's a thaw, we're repeating the same sorts of mistakes which we've done in the past. And the first brunt of it is again going to be borne by Northeast India. So that's the unfortunate bit. And I know it's a bit pessimistic, but it's always better to be prepared than to be sorry.
Absolutely. Let me once again go back to Ambassador Bhatia. Ambassador, we are now on the verge, we are on the eve of the Prime Minister's visit to China after a gap of 7 years for the SCO summit. Now, would you like to look at it at a further evidence of the quote-unquote thaw in relations between the two nations?
Well, I like to pick up by saying that what we need to be is neither optimistic nor pessimistic, but realistic. And that is what I think our government leaders are trying to do. It is not that they need us, the non-government people, to know as to what the challenges are. They all know about, within inverted commas, sins of China, border transgressions, strategic collusion with Pakistan, mischief in South Asia,
Yeah.
and of course the dam and the rest of it. But the point is this, and this is a very simple point which I would like scholars on this panel to answer. When you have an asymmetry of power, do you expect diplomacy to become a magic wand? It can never be. Diplomacy is to recognize the reality and try to create convergences where it is possible, but keeping your eyes completely open. This is what I think New Delhi is trying to do. Those who claim that nothing is happening, things are really bad, and Chinese are doing this, that, and the other, they will have to answer in a week's time when Mr. Modi meets President Xi Jinping. And as is expected, they will come out with a positive projection of the dialogue lasting about a year since the last meeting. The central point we also have to remember, and I think I want to bring in the broader geopolitical question here. India has a big challenge to manage its relations with the great powers. We all are looking at what is happening, the way the sharp deterioration that has taken place in India-US relationship between February and August 2025. We have undoubtedly India-Russia relationship in a good shape, but it would be wrong to say that it's totally hunky-dory. We are building up our relations with Europe, but we know European vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
We are the great champions of the global south. So keeping all this in mind, I think it is in India's interest to create some room for maneuver, some flexibility, some cordiality, some basis to keep talking to the Chinese leadership. And I think it is important for our young people and our public opinion to understand as to what is driving New Delhi. If we don't understand, and if we do not appreciate what the government is doing under very trying circumstances, we probably are really, standing at the wrong tree.
Absolutely. Now, I've got a slightly different question for Dr. Swaran Singh. Dr. Swaran Singh, while we are discussing India-China relations, we are discussing it in the backdrop of, what President Trump is doing as far as India is concerned. In fact, the US tariffs will kick in from 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. That's a different issue. I'll not go into that debate. But do you see India, China, Russia axis consolidating? What happens in that case?
I think yes, there is a great likelihood of President Putin, President Xi Jinping, and Prime Minister Modi sort of having perhaps a trilateral and sending a certain signal of them already. China and Russia have no limits partnership. So the fundamental difference that we notice here is the new mood in India-China relation, new sort of trade relations from 8-9 billion to now $65 plus billion trade with Russia. So India is, I think, a country that has moved in a certain way, which would enhance that proximity in terms of trilateral strategic relationship of these three countries, which is significant for various reasons. I mean, within BRICS, which is growing, RIC is a critical axis around which the larger body will work. Of course, within that, you will notice China is the largest economy. India would be second largest economy in BRICS. Also in Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So when you said Prime Minister Modi going to Shenzhen for SCO summit meeting, you can see it both in terms of compulsions versus opportunities. India not being there will make it, completely China monopolized deliberations. And
Yeah.
India's presence is significant there as a very important economy to be sitting there. And that trilateral signaling, if, there is a possibility of that kind of signaling to President Trump in that sense. There are already so many voices from John Bolton onwards. Several people have said it already that Trump tariffs are pushing India into China and Russia kind of fold, which both of them would like. I mean, Putin's stature depends on India and China standing next to him and housing him. China would like to wean India, as you said, away from United States. And India also sees opportunities in case of push comes to shove to
Yeah.
balance at least. We are also again very obsessed with strategic autonomy in the sense of being in every forum and not confining ourselves to one side. But remember, just one quick point that I want to make is India-US relations are not going anywhere. There is no replacement of that relationship. It's a huge relationship that we have. So other than a limited number of goods exports, which are now being slabbed 50% tariffs, of which only 20% is for buying oil from Russia. And on average, it comes when you look at others. For example, iPhones are not in
Yeah,
the tariff, pharmaceuticals are not in the tariff.
Yeah, but
So it's a strong relation.
Yeah, but Dr. Swaran Singh, we have seen, top American officials using a language that echoes Cold War rhetoric. For example, what I mean is that, the White House trade advisor, Peter Navarro, for example, he says that India serves as the global clearinghouse for Russian oil. And he says that if India wants to be treated as a strategic partner of the United States, it needs to start acting like one. So what kind of language is this?
I think all of you can vouch me on this, that the global level of narratives and language and body language has seen a certain amount of deterioration all around the world in some sense. So the kind of caricaturing that we notice in statements coming from very important people, starting from President Donald Trump himself, is something that is a cause of concern for old timers like me in that sense, who are used to very different kind of narratives, very different kind of interactions. So it is part of that. The reality is that same Europeans are doing bigger trade with Russia. Same Europeans are buying refined oil from India.
Right.
It's been clarified repeatedly. But of course, if they want to continue with that hype, if they want to placate President Trump by saying that's their botheration. I think we have to look at how we can make sure the world doesn't see us getting into problem with the United States. There are so many other sectors where we are still working together.
Yeah. Now let me take the general view. To how much do you think the tiff that we are having, the frostiness, the rustiness, whatever you call it, between India-US ties, how much it is to do with America not being able to sell military hardware to India the way they would have wanted to?
Only reason because prior to, there has been nowhere India has said that India is not going to purchase military hardware from US. Because all these big ticket purchases which are being progressed with US or with other countries also, the gestation time is quite a lot. There are a lot of deliberations which take place. And the projects like the aircraft procurement or engine procurement for the AMCA project, these are, long-term projects which take time for fructification. So negotiations have are going on, and I don't think at any point of time India has negated any sort of defense procurement from the US. And yes, because of the geopolitical situation, because of the stated this thing by the US president about mediating for ceasefire between India and Pakistan post Op Sindhu, and of course the trade tariff, and that has upended the entire relationship between the India and US. So I think you cannot say that the the armed sale or arm import is the main cause for the deterioration of the relationship.
Okay. Dr. Sripada Pathak, the Ambassador Bhatia is very, very optimistic and positive about Prime Minister Mr. Modi's visit to China for the SCO summit. Now, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think there could be a direction? Because if you look at the Ministry of External Affairs, that 12 point, this is the MEA, 12 point. That 12-point understanding that the MEA has issued. Now, they said the number one said that need to take a political perspective of the overall bilateral relationship while seeking a fair, reasonable and mutually acceptable framework for settlement of the boundary question in accordance with the agreement of the political parameters, so on and so forth. Now, they've talked about the need for a political perspective. What is your understanding on this? What could be the meaning of this political perspective?
I think, I'm very pessimistic about this sort of a view, because since we are talking about the SCO, let's not forget one thing, that it was Russia which got India into the SCO, while China actually supported Pakistan to get into the SCO. When Prime Minister Modi also met Xi Jinping last year, he had talked about the three mutuals, basically mutual respect, etc. That the need for saying that was because there has been no mutual respect, mutual stability, and so on. Even this time when Dr. Jaishankar met Wang Yi, he emphasized mutual respect, mutual sensitivity, and mutual interest. The fact that it's being reiterated again and again means that it's not really there. Why is this decision being taken that Prime Minister Modi goes to SCO? Well, it's an expansion. Second, Trump is completely unraveling the India-US relationship, which has been built over the years. So why not trade more or find complementarities within the expanded SCO? Will that happen with China? Again, I'm very, very skeptical. Even in the last 3 weeks, if you see, after Trump has started throwing his tariff tantrums even more, all the sorts of agreements, including the terms of reference for a trade deal, have been signed between India and Russia. It's not happening with the PRC. That lack of trust is here to stay, and it's good that it stays here, because young India doesn't want to make the same sorts of mistakes as have been done in the past. Unfortunately, what we see so far is that there are times in across multiple domains we tend to behave like a ball. Kicked by the US, roll onto the PRC. Kicked by the PRC, roll to the US. I don't think in this epoch of history that is something which our policymakers and our civilians, our youth, actually want. India is the third way out. So holding the ground, yeah, diplomacy goes on. That's why it's said that jaw is always better than paw. So that will keep going on, even with the PRC. But I don't see the trust coming back ever again. So it'll
Okay.
happen in limited ways. Russia
Right.
is a friend, it's been a partner, which is why it's welcome that Prime Minister Modi is going for the SCO meeting. It happens to be in Tianjin, so okay, Prime Minister is going for the SCO meeting. He's not going to Tianjin because it's Tianjin PRC.
Okay, you seem to be a lot skeptic about the outcome or about the Prime Minister's visit. Let me take this to Ambassador Bhatia. You already said that there could be forward movement. Now, what do you make? Same question I'm asking you. The MEA's number one point which they issued formally after the Wang Yi's visit is that it says that they need to take a political perspective of the overall bilateral relationship. Do you think that is what is going to happen with the Prime Minister's visit? Do you think there will be bilaterals or with Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the SCO summit, which is quite likely? What do you make of it?
Yes. When they say political perspective, obviously they are looking at perspective at the highest political leadership. It is the task of the president and the prime minister to keep giving broad political directions so that their ministers and officials proceed accordingly. This is how this process began last October, and I'm fairly certain that this will be continued and consolidated uh, through definitely a bilateral meeting as well. Now, let me further elaborate the idea because the issue here is that India-China relationship has a very strong bilateral component that we have spent most of our hour discussing. But there are regional and especially global aspects as well. We are members of the international community,
Yes.
and there are many issues on which India and China agree. Maybe a bit less than in the past, but still the agreement is there. And if you look at the very document that is in front of you, the last point, you would see the two countries support multilateralism. They support a rule based order. They support WTO. And they have even subscribed to the idea of a multipolar world. Mr. Jaishankar had made a plea for multipolar world and multipolar Asia. On multipolar Asia, China has either kept quiet or demolished the idea. But on multipolar world, they are agreeable. So the point we have to remember, we are given to pessimism. Nobody stops you. You can remain pessimistic. But if you are looking at the document, which reflects in a very masterly way the summation of very complex issues discussed at the highest political level, then you have to concede the point that the two countries are making progress. They deserve our support, and I'm fairly certain that this process will be carried forward by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Tianjin, China.
Absolutely. I have just 2 to 3 minutes to go. Professor Swaran Singh, your thoughts on what are we likely to see in the next couple of months?
Let me make a very fundamental point to begin with. As India and China expand, grow, transform, become more global, their interactions at regional and global level will showcase that they have great similarity, if not they're not identical, but they have greater similarity in how they look at international regional challenges, how they want to resolve them. And that in turn has a positive spin on bilateral issues. There was a time when we were mostly worried about the boundary and that was dominating all our narratives. Today, India and China see themselves working for so many global and regional issues where they see that they can really work together. They have similar understanding on how to solve issues.
Right.
And multilateralism is clearly one of those. And that has showcased that transformation. Of course, it also throws up newer challenges.
Right.
When we had no trade, there were no trade disputes. Now we have greater problems of formidable deficit. All kinds of new issues will also keep cropping. But I think fundamentally, the second point which I want to make is that in any relationship, there will always be challenges. There is going to be no relationship where there are no irritations. There are going to be irritations.
Absolutely.
Both sides are
Swaran.
showcasing increasingly becoming in grip of how to manage, quote unquote, their relationship.
Correct. Very, very briefly, in about 20-30 seconds, Sriparna Pathak, I mean, would you like to revise some of your thoughts? Do you see there is no positive in the days ahead?
Absolutely no. In Chinese, there's a saying, Ishan Arhu, one mountain cannot have two tigers. And China has done everything possible within its means to ensure that within Asia, as Ambassador Bhatia also said, they've stayed silent on a multipolar Asia. There's a reason as to why they've stayed silent on that. So if we want to become over-optimistic and keep making the same mistakes over and over again, that's going to be really unfortunate. But I hope that the leadership and the youth decide better and not make the same sorts of mistakes as have been done in the past.
Right.
Thank you.
General Kalita, the fear of making a mistake does not mean that we have to maintain status quo, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We should not be status-based. We need to move with time. However, I just want to make two points. One is that in spite of having shared, very briefly, in spite of having shared interest, India and China traditionally has been having competing priorities. and which has resulted in points of disagreement more often in the regional as well as global and multilateral forums. That is one issue which I wanted to highlight. And the second issue is improvement or thaw in the relationship is definitely welcome, because that will enable us to grow economically as also militarily. But my recommendation is, as we approach the thaw in relationship, we should go with our eyes open, feet on ground, and continue to concentrate on our capability enhancement.
Absolutely.
And we should view everything with a lot of nuanced and measured way.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is not so simplistic to understand or comprehend India-China relations. It is also not enough to look at these relations from the Trumpian lens, from the lens of America under President Trump. And also, we have to understand the strengths of our countries, diplomacy, government, and the people's power, the soft power approach that we adopt, and we hope things are going to make progress in the days ahead. On that note, I thank my esteemed panelists tonight for joining me on this program, and the viewers for watching the show. Good night and goodbye.